We're going to look at some color correction in Edius today, mainly using the primary color corrector tool. We're going to look at using it on footage that comes out of the camera already colored and footage that comes out of the camera in log. So let's start at the beginning. Footage that comes out in Rec 709. That is the TLDR is just the standard video that comes out of your camera, already colored, ready for broadcast. The long version, is ITUR recommendation 709, usually is abbreviated as Rec 709, BT 709, ITU-R 709, standard developed by the radio communication sector of the International Telecommunication Union, or ITU-R, for image encoding and signal characteristics of high definition television. Now, the reason that's important is because we are going to need to know what Rec 709 is for when it's not already there. But let's start with it already there. So this is some footage I shot yesterday at just a crosswalk where there was a hit and run a week or so ago. This is right on out of my camera, my ENG camera. It's a Sony 400, our standard EMG camera here at channel 9. So if you look at the footage, it's kind of like a little tough. There's some shadows here, but it's sunset, so there's some highlights over here on the houses, and the sky's kind of bright where this is kind of shadowy. Now it's fine, totally fine coming out of camera. Happily use that shot. What we're going to do is just use the primary color corrector tool to make it look a little better. Here we go. In our effects tab, we're going to find the primary color correction tool. We're just going to drop that right on the clip. First thing we're going to do before we even open primary color corrector, once we have it on there, is we're going to open our little vector scope display tool right here in Edius. If you click that, you're going to want to make sure you have two different things selected. This is how I like to do it anyway. I like to have this little drop down right here, want it to say waveform, and you want to change right next to that the little hamburger icon, change that to Y color. So what that does is it shows you these the higher lines here show the brighter portions of the screen, and down here are the darker portions of the screen. And then when you change it to color, you can see the actual colors in the screen. So you can see the blues in the sky right here. As you kind of scroll through, see that red car right here in the frame that's reflected over here driving through. So it gives you a good idea of the color space on the image and the luminance or the brightness or darkness of the image. So over here we have our 100 to 0. Ideally you don't want to go over 100 and you don't want to go below 0. So those are our kind of our targets that we're working with as we go through using the primary color corrector. Okay, so let's open her up. If I have the luxury of having more than one screen, I will have the primary color corrector on its own screen. Since I don't, it's showing this little video here. It's all kind of crammed into one screen. This is also how I edit in the field. I usually color almost every shot for every story. Once you get used to it, it's pretty quick. So this is kind of my setup for the field anyway. So let's look at a couple things in the primary color corrector quick. You have your source, which is your color space for your video. As you see here, Edius calls it BT 709, so we know that that comes out. That's Rec 709, just the standard color space. Destination we'll get into later, the base, display light, the gain. These are just more ways to affect it. The main things we're going to use in the primary color corrector tool, you have your exposure, which you can use if it's a little dark. We're not really going to use that too much. Your white balance, so you can adjust the tint, which is warmer or cooler. And then you can adjust the hue or the temperature, which is warmer or cooler, and then the tint or the hue, which is a little kind of more purple, a little more green. All these little toggle boys over here on the right side are just reset, so you can reset each individual thing as you go through, as you color. Then you have your lift, gamma, gain, and saturation. You can use all those individually. They all have their own little YRGB effect sliders right there if you want to. What I usually use though is this YRGB curve. The reason I like the YRGB curve as opposed to using these tools is it's kind of a catch-all. You can do everything with just a couple simple tweaks. So the Y is for the luminance and the RGB is for the colors. So as you affect each, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines on this curve. As you affect each little dot on the line, it's going to affect the image differently. So starting up here, these are your highlights, and these are your mids, and these are your darks. And then you have your like mid highs and your mid darks. So as you see me work through, you'll start to see the image get changed. You'll see the luminance, the brightness or darkness get changed, the highlights or the shadows. You'll also see the saturation get changed, because as I'm evening out the luminance, it'll boost the color. You're actually going to pull more saturation out of the image just by affecting the luminance. So let's look as I affect the dots over here. We're going to watch the luminance over here. You're going to see these kind of bars go up, and then you're going to see the image get affected over here. So when I'm working with my footage that I shot straight on my camera, my ENG camera, I usually start with the highs and just bump them up just a little bit until they start flattening out. See how you can see the top up there just kind of start to plateau out. So that's where I'm starting to lose some color. Then I usually go down to my darks, my shadows, and I just bring this one down a little bit, just like that. And you'll see the contrast. You get some nice dark tones, and you're seeing a little more color come into the waveform right here. Now I'm going to go into my mid, and I'm just going to tweak that. I usually start going up. I'm getting some more out of the middle of the screen, but I'm losing some in the highlights in the sky. So maybe I'm going to bring it down just a skosh and maybe find somewhere, it just depends what part of the screen you want to highlight to. Do you want to brighten up the shadows a little bit, or do you want to kind of even out the sky a little bit? That car has some really nice, interesting color on it now when you bring it down that way. I'm going to kind of actually lift it up. I think I like it better, a little lifted. No, maybe I like it better a little lower. So it's all very subjective too. It kind of like just depends what you want to do, what looks good to you. So then we're going to just check and uncheck it. So after just a quick tweak, see how you get a lot more saturation out of the image, especially in the blues and the red in the car. And the sidewalk, everything looks a little more crisper. It's a little less flat. The road's a little more saturation in the road, definitely some more saturation in the sky. The cool thing is when you do that to one piece of video on your timeline, you can then take that and apply the effect to another piece of video. So since I don't have anything actually edited down, I'm not in Teams, so I apologize. Teams is closed, but it's still popping up. So like this video is also like could use some color correcting. So instead of starting from scratch, I can click my piece of video that I already colored right here, and I can just go to the information tab and pull the primary color corrector over and just drop it on there. And it already gives me a pretty good base. It goes, you see, if you look at our scope up here, it kind of evens things out. You're getting more color. It's a little more even, and the color right here, it looks a little, since the darker part of the screen is what's in focus, I'm going to kind of bring that up a little as opposed to what I did in the last one. I'm probably going to drop the brights a little further down. Sometimes what you can do too is if you really want to just see what part of the image you're affecting is like just drop it crazy low. Obviously you wouldn't want to use that, but it's a good way to be like, okay, well clearly I'm affecting a lot of the image by playing with this dot right here. And then same inverse down here. If you bring this one all the way up or all the way down, you can kind of see like, okay, that's kind of the part of the image that this one's affecting. So just Control Z that guy real quick. Even that guy out just a skosh. Maybe bring this guy. It's a little more even overall. I kind of like that. So yeah, see just a little quick. So once you kind of get in the flow of it, that's a little dark. Once you kind of get in the flow of it with the stuff you shot and the scenes you shot, you'll kind of be able to get an idea of like how to go through, color one shot, and then apply that to the rest of your shots in your sequence. So if you have a couple dozen shots, you color one, if they're all in the same scene, then you can just apply that same coloring effect to all the other ones. Okay, so that's working in primary color corrector with Rec 709 footage. Now let's talk about working with footage that we shoot in log. So here is when you shoot in your camera and you're changing the color gamut, is just essentially the color space. It's how you're telling your camera what color you want it to shoot and what color space you want it to shoot in. This is the FX3. This is set up so that it's shooting an S gamut 3 cine /S log 3. So all that means is that the color space, the Sony color space, is the cine S log 3. So when we shoot in log, you're shooting a very, very, very flat image. So this is an image that I shot in log on this camera. So you can see it's very flat. When you look at the vector scope or at the waveform monitor over here, there's like no, it's all very gray. It's very washed out, as you'll see in the image as well. The reason you do that is because you're essentially, instead of telling the camera to color it, you're telling the camera, instead of using your computing power to color the image, just gather the information and then I'll make sense of it later in post. So we'll look at what I did. I like it a lot with like high contrast, like really bright brights or dark darks. You can kind of get a lot of more bang for your buck out of those situations. You also have a lot more just like control over the color. If you're familiar with still photography, it's like shooting in RAW as opposed to shooting in a JPEG. There's just a lot more information in the file that you can bring out later. So yeah, first thing you want to do is make sure you're set up to shoot in log. Let's talk about what a LUT is real quick. LUT is just short for lookup table, and it's essentially, as this is from a Sony website, it's a simple table of fixed numerical values that can be applied to video to alter its look. It can change an image contrast or color or both. So it's essentially it's a file that you drop on to your or it's an effect that you drop on your file to color it. So Edius has that already in the primary color corrector. So let's look at this image here and we'll start from scratch. So let's drop the primary color corrector on there. As you see, immediately it gets some color put in there. Edius realizes that you shot in an S-Log because of the metadata in the clip. So it applies destination LUT to it. I'm gonna make this bigger for now just so you can see. So you see up here where before it said BT709, now the source video is auto, so it automatically finds a Sony S-Gamut 3 cine /S log 3. So the S before the log is just saying that it's Sony's log, and it's their third iteration of it. Cameras are always updating, creating different like log profiles. So it recognizes that automatically and puts its destination /LUT into project color space BT709, which is great. That's like Edius's interpretation of it. What we're going to change is we are going to put Sony 709 on there as our destination LUT. Boom. And here, let's put this guy back over here. So when we go from BT709 to our Sony 709 LUT, kind of evens things out. It's a little flatter, but I like working in the Sony 709 LUT because that's just what it's designed for working with S-Log. Sony put out that LUT specifically for S-Log. But essentially, once you drop primary color corrector on there, you can tweak a couple things and you're good to go. Let's get a spot where the sun's not glaring in our face. Cool. So this is a pretty good start. Even like if we just leave it like that, like it automatically did its thing. It colored, just dropping primary color corrector on there and swapping it to Sony 709. Like that's a fine looking shot. Right? It's nice. The reds really pop. So the reds kind of pop a little too much. The snow's still a little too flat. So same thing, we want to have our waveform monitor up. We can see that the highs are still a little high. It's still, everything's a little up. I mean, it's shooting outside on a kind of flat-ish cloud-covered day with snow. So it's not ideal shooting conditions, but you can get a lot out of it. So we're gonna do the same thing. It's the same process that I use when I'm working with video out of my ENG camera. I just kind of work my way down the line. The thing that's mainly different is small moves make a bigger impact because it's designed to, there's just so much more information in there that there's like a smaller move just literally does more because you're affecting more information. So I'm gonna actually start with the very highest point, which we didn't touch in the last one. And same thing, like if you bring it all the way down, see how it's just affecting that, like really, like making a hole in the sky. It's taking the really blown out parts of the image and just affecting those parts right there. So we're gonna start, and you can kind of see right here where this really high goes, like folds in on itself, and that's when you start to get that like negative effect, which we don't want today. So we're going to try to just kind of even that out, and then we're going to go down to our next little dot, see how it's bringing everything down a little bit more, evening it out a little bit more. I'm really, at this point, I'm watching the vector scope more than I'm looking at the image, just to get a kind of like idea for where I want to go. Now we're going to go down to our bottom spot. It's affecting our lower end of it. And then our middle spot, kind of bring that up a little bit. I mean, that's pretty good. If we take this and then we go, let's put our primary on there and see, just change this to Sony 709. And then we have, so this is just straight Sony 709, and this is making a few tweaks to the curve. So Sony 709, and then making a few tweaks to the curve. A little more contrast, saturation's a little more popped. So it's a nice looking image, and there's detail in there, the detail in the snow, the detail in the clouds, that if you're shooting in Rec 709, the detail in the trees and the blacks and the darks, like all of that detail, some of that's just not going to come through if you're shooting in Rec 709. Especially on in situations like this where we have really high whites and really dark darks, and it's a good opportunity to shoot and log and give yourself help yourself out in post. One more thing, so this is the shot they actually used in the clip. One more thing that I did with this was I applied a little mask just to affect the color of the sky, to bring that up a little bit more since it kind of got out. All that I do over here with our little mask is I just masked out this part of the image that I wanted to affect and track it a little bit. And then I applied a chrominance filter, and in there I keyed out. So if I show the key, you'll see I keyed out the part of the image that I wanted to affect, just using this little dropper guy. And then I put my 3-way color corrector on the inside of it, and that way I can affect that. I can just use that to affect just that part of the image. So as you see, the black part of the image that's keyed out here is the only part of the image that I'm affecting. Or I'm sorry, the white part. The white part is the only part of the image that I'm affecting when I click the key. So when I show key, you play with the different parts of it that you want to affect, and you just play around with it until you get just those parts. And then I can affect just the inside. I put the 3-way color on there, jump in there, and you can see I kind of just bumped the saturation, bumped the contrast in the mids, and came out. I was pretty happy with it. I was pretty happy with just a quick little mask, and gets just that one little part of the image to pop a little bit more. Yeah, so those are just a few quick little things that you can do with primary color corrector, either in your daily stuff or your long form stuff. If you're working with log footage and post, make sure to give yourself enough time to play around with it. It's a lot more powerful, which also means it takes a little longer. It's a little tougher to do. Play around with stuff just out of your camera too when you have time, and I think you'll be a lot happier with the results. Okay.